Hello, everyone. Forest Focus. As Nottingham Forest are linked with two central defenders, one of whom shone for his country at Euro 2024. We'll discuss that news and assess whether Carlos Miguel will be the first choice keeper next season after his signing was officially confirmed yesterday. So we'll start with those transfer links. The first one is Jaka Bijol, a Slovenian defender who has been linked to the Reds via Italian media, along with Aston Villa, Inter Milan, Stuttgart, Wolfsburg, Lazio, and a couple of other Serie A clubs. He is 25 years old and currently plays for Udinese, also in Italy, obviously, and he's valued at around 15 million. Interestingly, he is coming off the back of, as I said at the start there, a very impressive Euro 2024 with Slovenia. Obviously, they drew 0-0 with England in that pretty awful match. Where they looked very organised and disciplined, and then they went on to play in the first round of the knockouts against Portugal, where they took it all the way to penalties with a 0-0 draw in the Ronaldo show. So you can see that he has a bit of pedigree about him, a little bit of look at his stats. Like I say, currently plays for Udinese as a centre half, age 25. Stats taken from FBref. So he's got a pretty decent goal threat, scored 3 goals in his first season in Italy, none last season as Udinese struggled, but did stay up in the end. A couple of assists as well in that season where he scored 3 goals, and he was a goal threat as well in Russian football, playing for CSKA Moscow before moving to Udinese 2 years ago. Passes stats aren't so particularly amazing, but they're okay. The main part of his game, obviously, is his defensive work. Shakes out pretty well in terms of tackles and blocks. Very strong in terms of clearances and aerial duels won. Not so quite as good as interceptions, but might suggest his reading of the play isn't quite as good. Did the old YouTube trick, floor trick, I must admit, of watching the highlight reels. Again, I think a running theme with what Forest are after this summer. It looks like physicality at the back. Obviously, they struggled, I think, in that area last year when Willy Bolly didn't play. Obviously, we know that set piece woes, so he looks pretty rugged, pretty tough. Puts himself about into tackles. I mean, I must admit, a few of them looks a bit reckless, but he doesn't mind a tackle. Looks kind of okay on the ball. Like I said, a goal threat from set pieces as well. And it feels like age 25 is probably entering his prime years, and the price isn't too bad at 25 million. And also the clubs linked with him. Aston Villa, obviously going into the Champions League, Inter Milan, one of the top clubs in Italian football. So an interesting link. See how that one develops. The second player that we've been linked with is from French football, a 22-year-old defender who plays for Le Havre, called Etienne Youte Kinkoue, if I'm saying that right. Forgive me if I'm not. Valued at 7 million as he's entering the final year of his contract. Started off in Italy, was taken to Italy for Inter Milan as a young talent. Wolves are also linked, and he's coming off the back of a decent season, or a good season, I should say, in French football. Interestingly, again, around physicality, he's listed as being 6'5", so haven't seen much of him. It's a report from Football Insider, who are pretty hit and miss, as people who follow this stuff regularly will know. At my previous place of work, I weren't even allowed to write Football Insider stuff because it was deemed a bit too Wild West in terms of what they reported. But the person who wrote it, Peter O'Rourke, does have a good track record of getting transfer stuff right. I remember, I think he was the first person to say Leipzig were going to sign Ollie Burke for 13 million, which seemed mad at the time when that rumour broke. But obviously he was proved right because Fawaz took the first offer that came Forest's way. Wisely, as it turned out. He's not had the best of times since leaving. But Kinkoue, see how that develops, if it does at all. Forest obviously in the market for at least one centre half this summer, 2 probably, with Willy Bolly not necessarily being able to, well, certainly not being able to be guaranteed to play 30 plus games. Joe Worrell looks like he's still on his way out. He wasn't featured in the pre-season footage with players coming back prominently at all. So I suspect Joe will go. So Forest, even if Murillo stays, are going to want to sign at least one, but they'll probably need two, with Omar Bamidele still being a younger player himself and developing. So centre halves the priority for me. I know the other lads were saying the other day about signing a striker. Kelvin said that, and Thames. I'm still not sure if we'll get one. Certainly not a front line one necessarily. Taiwo Awoniyi and Chris Wood both coming off the back. Well, certainly Chris Wood coming off the back of a good season. Taiwo's proven. So it's the whole injury status around them that put cast down them, because lots of clubs only have two strikers, and Forest will be on that list at the moment. So I think they want a third, but I'm not saying they're necessarily going to sign someone to come in and replace one of those two. The Shea Adams stuff has gone quite quiet. I wonder if that'll be picked up again. I also wonder if we kind of had to revise our budgets going into next season, having sold players for really good fees. I wonder if we're in a better state financially in terms of the budget to maybe invest a little bit more in other areas of the squad. I don't know that, but obviously having signed Elliot Anderson for a lot of money, we'll have to wait and see. There's a podcast coming out next week, probably, with Kieran Maguire about PSR, FFP, I think you can still call it, and how that's developing and where Forest are at. So do check that out. So that's the gist of the latest transfer rumours around central defenders. Just before we come on to Carlos Miguel, don't forget Trent Navfest is on Saturday, this coming Saturday, from 2 p.m. You can get your tickets by going to gigantic.com. Just search Navfest to secure your spot. Live acts include Stan Buckroyd, High Speed Peach, The Tryst, who have organised it, Rooks, Flow Acoustic, Steve McGill, who plays regularly at the Nav before Forest games, Ben Kirby live music, and DJ Kai Combs. I'm saying that right. But it's basically covers stuff from the 80s all the way through to now. So a bit of something for everyone. So it should be a good event. And thanks as ever to the Nav for their support. Right, let's talk a little bit about Carlos Miguel, officially signed yesterday, 4-year deal. I'm going to revisit our chat with Nathan Joyce from the other week to discuss what he had to say about Carlos Miguel. I know people might want to have seen it, but it's worth revisiting to kind of assess his strengths and weak points. He hasn't really played many or any games since then, because he left Corinthians with their fans absolutely hating him by the look of it. So this move better work out for him, because you don't think he can go back there, having chosen to come to the Premier League, which you can't blame him for, really, I'd say. But he'd only just got into the Corinthians team after biding his time for 2 or 3 years. So here is what Nathan from the Copper Club had to say about him. Do check out the Copper Club if you haven't seen it already. Lots of great insight into South American players. So we'll see you on the other side in about 4.5 minutes.
I think because he's 25 and he's played very limited first team football, that does concern people. And it is a minor red flag. He has been highly regarded at Corinthians. But with Brazilian football and what the Brazilian journalist sort of told me when I spoke to him, just to sort of back up my thoughts in terms of, in Brazil, if you have a cult hero who plays in a certain position, they sort of play there until their knees go or they want to retire, to be honest. And Corinthians have had a goalkeeper called Cassio for the last 10 to 12 years now, and he's had over 700 appearances. And in the last sort of 6 months or so, like, he's not been performing as well, and rumoured that he wanted to be on his way out. So as soon as that happened, Carlos Miguel got his opportunity. And you can look at it saying he's only played 10, 12 games really in the last year or two, to be honest with you. He's really just sort of bided his time with Corinthians for whatever particular reason. But he's come in and he's actually done a pretty good job, to be honest with you. There's pros and negatives, which I'll dive into. And the pro being 6'8". I think people have been worried about that because they've instantly gone, well, Pantilimon couldn't get down. Now, I watched Corinthians last night against Atletico Gio, and he pulled off one ridiculous save, which I put on Twitter straight away, which just to show his reflexes. So in and around the box with his saves and his ability to bounce and get back up is actually really impressive, especially for being 6'8". I think that's something to bring up because people just think, well, how on earth does he get down? He feels the goal, but is he agile enough to actually bounce back? And he has that ability in his locker. He's obviously incredibly tall, so from catching crosses, there's no problem at all. Set pieces is the obvious question, and there is a little bit of a red flag from what I have seen. Whether it'll be stamped out or not, I'm not sure. He's a puncher, and obviously being 6'8", and when you stick your hand out, no one's going to be able to get that. But there's never really the calmness to go and collect it. And for 6'8", it is a little bit worrying from what I've seen. And it is a small sample size. We are going off 8 Brazilian games and 4 in the Sudamericana. But in crowded areas and against the bigger teams, he's been known to punch from set pieces and hasn't made any errors from that, which have led to goals. But I winced a little bit because I knew exactly what Forest fans would want to hear. They want someone calm and composed in goal after what's happened over the last 12 months or so. The only other negative I really have is he's very good with both feet, to be honest with you, but he knows it. And when he has time on the ball, like he's been caught out a few times. Now, he's got away with it in Brazil. He wouldn't get away with it in the Premier League. And look what happened with Matt Turner, okay, and then the way that people turned on him. So that would be a cause for concern. He needs to sort of... It's a bit Bryce Samba-esque in terms of how he was relaxed too much and a bit too cocky sometimes in his ability, and that often got him into one or two sort of sticky situations, we'll put it. And Miguel's slightly different. However, a huge tick is his distribution out of his hands, whether throwing it, whether kicking it. He's really quick to release it. And Forest, obviously, as you know, over the last season or two, have played counter-attacking football in the Premier League, looking to set the wingers off and break and make sure that it's almost 4 Forest players on the opposing 3. And Miguel can not only throw it really far, but he can kick it with accuracy and pace as well. So he's not lofting these balls. So that side of his distribution is great. And he can kick it with his left and right. He is really capable, again, which is a huge tick for a goalkeeper. But when he dawdles on the ball or just gets a little bit too cocky, that's when errors creep in. It is a red flag, but it's something which could easily be stamped out by the manager or the coaching staff. So it wouldn't be something which is not fixable. And yeah, you say he's 25, but he's still young for a goalkeeper. I'm still not convinced as to whether he's going to come in and be the number 1 goalkeeper. I read reports saying like he wants to come and challenge. Well, as a goalkeeper, when you're starting for any club, apart from if you're Scott Carson, you're probably going to go into a club and be like, well, I want the number 1 shirt. No one goes there really to settle unless you go into, like I said, with Man City for a 3rd choice keeper. But all the reports are going to be, well, Miguel wants to go and earn the first team shirt if he's moving to the Premier League. He's not going to say, well, I'm happy to go and sit on the bench. So I take that with a pinch of salt. I'm still not 100% sure whether he would go in and challenge Sells. It'll be interesting to see. But again, 3-4 million is a ridiculously low fee. It's a calculated risk. But look, a lot of Brazilian contacts of mine and people I've spoken to, I've only had good things to say about him. And he's almost been waiting for his opportunity. And it's come 2 or 3 years later than what he'd planned. But moving across to the Premier League, yes, it's a huge sort of jump from where he's been. But there's every chance he could settle in.
Thanks to Nathan there for what he brought us on Carlos Miguel in terms of insight. I guess the key points there that he made aren't his height particularly. I know the graphic I did said is very tall. I suspect that a lot of the coverage will be around his height initially when people first see him. That was obviously the thing that caught our attention as Forest fans. But now he's here. I think Forest have signed what looks like a promising young in goalkeeping terms keeper at the age of 25. And like Nathan said, the key points are probably will he start and the fee. The fee being about 3.4 million is really not nothing, but it's very little risk and very little in terms of PSR. So if it doesn't work out, Forest haven't really lost anything. They've got a perfectly steady keeper in Matt Sells. I don't think he was like outstanding last season consistently. He had some really good moments. Sheffield United away. Don't think we necessarily win the game without him in that first half, stepping up. Obviously, the save made against Liverpool was great as well, or even though we ultimately lost that game. He was at fault for a couple of goals. The one that always kind of sticks in my mind is that Chelsea winner. I don't know how he got onto that cross, but yeah, he was steady, he was solid, he was calm and composed, which is probably what we needed at the time. And if he ends up starting the season, then I've no problem with that. I'm not sure he's an elite keeper. Could Carlos Miguel be that? I don't know. It's interesting to see how he goes in pre-season and certainly in that first Carabao Cup game if he doesn't start the first Premier League fixture. I think my inclination at the moment would probably be that Sells gets the shirt to start with, unless there's an injury situation, obviously, or one one of them or Miguel really rips it up in pre-season and looks amazing. If you can read too much into pre-season, I'm not a particular believer in that necessarily because they're not competitive games. But looking forward to see how he goes, especially around set pieces. Like I said earlier in this show, feels like Forest are going for physicality and presence to deal with their set piece issues. Obviously, Miguel's got that. So if he can be a positive factor in us fixing set pieces and he's decent with his distribution, then it's an interesting signing and definitely commend the work that Forest have done around transfers so far. This is another positive bit of business after Elliot Anderson and Moreira and Stamanic as well. Even if he doesn't come off, then they weren't big fees. Anderson was a big fee, obviously. So we're looking to recoup a lot from him in terms of contributions and perhaps value down the road. But very happy with Miguel. Look forward to seeing what he can do in a red shirt. But like I say, my suspicion would be at the moment, without any preseason games played very early, but I suspect it will be Sells that starts. So let's see how preseason develops. That starts at the weekend against Chesterfield, and then they've got the usual Olympiacos game and a few others dropped in between the training camp in Spain with matches against Millwall and Sunderland. Will be kind of okay tests. I think they'll probably arrange one more game against a big European side, or I suspect they will. Right, I forgot to make one last point about Jaka Bijol, which could give Forest an edge, just around Miran Pavlin, who, according to, him was told Slovenian media that he's going to be appointed as technical director for Forest starting from Monday. He's worked out for the Slovenian FA as director of the national teams for the past 4 years. So he's obviously got a bit of an in there with Bijol. I don't know if he's made a recommendation, but if Forest are like genuinely keen on signing him, then that certainly doesn't do them any harm if Miran Pavlin does in fact join us. Nothing's been confirmed by Forest. Right, we shall be back tomorrow with a Q&A is the plan with Pete and Temps and maybe one of the ex-pros who are regulars. See if we can get one of those on board, just trying to confirm all that. So keep an eye out for a prompt to fire us your questions over. As ever, if you've enjoyed this, do hit like on this video and subscribe to the channel or wherever you listen in the audio form, and do consider becoming a channel member. That would be greatly appreciated. Right, like I say, we'll be back tomorrow. So thanks very much for your company. If we don't see you then we shall hopefully see you soon.